Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for our Canal Days episode of the Billings Cemetery in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. As always, I'm your host, Carrie, along with my co-host, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Cromwell. Our Canal Days series delves into the vast collection of historical sites throughout Massachusetts, with Robert's expertise of the local history as our personal guide. Each episode, we uncover history throughout local communities with the historic landmarks. Today's episode of Canal Days, again, will be canvassing Billings Cemetery. So, reveal the historic origins of the Billings Cemetery.
It's the second oldest cemetery within East Longmeadow, and it was formed in 1803 when Seddy's Billings, a resident of this area, decided to give the land over to Longmeadow and for burial purposes only. Notice it's called Billings Hill Cemetery, so this must be a name of the region. It's named after him, I guess, indirectly. Now, his son, Loman Billings, is the first one buried there. Maybe that's why he decided to donate the land, is because he knew that his son was already dead and he wanted them buried here close by, and he decided to start up what was typically a neighborhood cemetery. Neighborhood cemeteries started getting very big around 1800, so maybe that's why the thought was in his head. And it's grown from there. It's located on the corner of Prospect Street and Pease Road. And it's a cemetery that has a lot of very old stones, burials, but then it goes very new very quickly.
And describe the layout of the stones within the cemetery.
So most of the old ones are all in the corner by that intersection I described to you. They're all clustered there, and so there's a lot of early 1800, mid 1800 burials in that location. And I would say there's about 60 of them or so. But then there's very quickly the limestone ones take over. Now, East Longmeadow is known for the brownstone gravestones, and they have a lot of them here. Instead of them, like most cemeteries around Massachusetts, where by about 1812 no more brownstones were used, in this cemetery they used very much into the 1840s. And then very quickly it changes into 1900 burials, and then modern late 1900, early 21st century burials. And so what happened probably is that the population of this neighborhood must have grown very quickly in the late 1900s. And thus you see a light population, a very low population, 1800s, and then boom. And you can see this by the different kinds of stones in the cemetery.
And stick around and we'll be right back after a quick announcement. Are you fascinated by local history and eager to investigate the obscure treasures off the beaten path throughout the state of Massachusetts? Or maybe just seeking an unforgettable cultural activity for family and friends to enjoy? Look no further than Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, founded by Robert Cromwell. With over a decade of experience, Robert offers captivating tours and presentations of historic sites and landmarks throughout the state. Whether you're interested in canals, cemeteries, charming churches, or more, Robert's tours provide for a unique and enriching experience for all. And that's not it. You can also schedule private tours tailored to your interests, ensuring a personalized adventure and unforgettable memories. Perfect for families and groups of all sizes, making for an exciting hands-on learning experience that brings history to life. Simply visit holyokecanaltour.org or email bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com to book your private tour today. Getting back to our episode of the Billings Cemetery, outline the orientation of the oldest stones within the cemetery for us.
All right, this cemetery's oldest monuments and stones and burials do lie on the east-west axis, and so the head of the people do lie towards the west and the feet towards the east. There's hardly any footstones around though. So thus, the headstones should point towards the west, towards the road, and they do. So that has not changed, and there's been no shifting around of these stones to face a certain direction or having changed 180 degrees like a lot of cemeteries did to force it so that the inscriptions face to the road. They already did. So you didn't have to change much. And a lot of cemeteries went through what was called a beautification period, and they shifted the stones around to face towards the busiest road that's associated with the cemetery. So this one's in a very pure state.
And describe any correlations to other cemeteries throughout the town.
Well, there's 4 cemeteries in East Longmeadow. This is the second oldest. So thus it has some of the pioneers of East Longmeadow. And remember I told you it gets very modern very quickly. So it only has a tiny old section. And then that is very similar to a lot of the cemeteries in East Longmeadow, where there's a little cluster of very old, and then boom, on it goes to very modern very quickly, which is very unusual. Now, I mentioned also that there's a lot more brownstones deeper in time into the 1800s because you had still low-cost brownstones available within this town, which supplied most of the communities of the Connecticut River Valley. So it's a very nice-looking cemetery, and it compares well with the other ones. They're very similar overall. And you can actually call these the 4 neighborhood cemeteries of East Longmeadow, because basically that's what they work out to be.
And thank you for listening to our Canal Days podcast and our episode on the Billings Cemetery, and joining us on our journey to the rich history of the Connecticut River Valley. We hope you enjoyed uncovering some of the hidden and overlooked marvels and their fascinating stories that shaped our past in the state of Massachusetts. A special thanks to Robert Camus, founder of the Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, for sharing his passion and expertise with us. Remember, you can find more information about Robert's tours, book private tours, and explore the Canal Days video and podcast series at holyokecanaltour.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and share. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future episodes. Don't forget to keep exploring and discovering history that is hidden in plain sight all around us. And thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune into our next episode of Canal Days and log on to holyokecanaltour.org. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Canal Days. As always, I am your host, Terry, along with my co-host, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. Our Canal Days series delves into the vast collection of historical sites throughout Massachusetts, with Robert's expertise as a local history as our personal guide. Each episode, we uncover history throughout local communities with historic houses, meaningful monuments, preeminent pivotal pioneers, and remarkable remaining remnants, all while uncovering their seminal significance. Today's episode of Canal Days will be discussing the Brookside Cemetery in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. So can you describe 2 special stones that are within the cemetery?
Yes, there are 2 stones that are in the original arrangement of the stones to each other and on the correct east-west orientation. The headstone has inscription pointed towards the west, and the footstone has inscription pointing towards the east. Thus, both gravestones point away from each other, and the body is between those 2. And that is very hard to find. So most cemeteries have had their stones moved around. They like to have a similar look to all the arrangement of the stones later in the 1800s, and they wanted to look like the modern garden-style cemeteries, any orientation. And so a lot of cemeteries had their stones moved, except in these cemeteries much further away from population centers, where the superintendent wouldn't move them very much. and the footstones will stay around because no one's worrying about cutting the grass once a week, and they cut it much less and get much more less aggravation and less willingness to throw out the footstones. Thus, there are two sets of gravestones side by side, which are pointing in the correct direction, and the gravestones themselves are facing away from each other. Incredible. I've looked for this situation for 25 years. I've only found 4 examples, and 2 of them, and they're at Brookside Cemetery, and the far away from the entrance point where they come to a triangular tip.
And can you reveal the start of the cemetery?
This cemetery, the Brookside, is a neighborhood cemetery, started up because Longmeadow knew that they needed more burial sites further away from the main green of Longmeadow. And so they started this up within Longmeadow. In 1893, it passed on to East Longmeadow. And so you have a couple of neighborhood cemeteries within East Longmeadow. Brookside is one of them, and it is the smallest one of all. It was probably thought of in 1802 and ready for action in 1803. And there's only a few stones from that old. The reason why, of course, it was a small neighborhood, not much around. And so you got what you got here.
Are you fascinated by local history and eager to investigate the obscure treasures off the beaten path throughout the state of Massachusetts? Or maybe just seeking an unforgettable cultural activity for family and friends to enjoy? Look no further than historical tours of Greater Holyoke. Founded by Robert Camus. With over a decade of experience, Robert offers captivating tours and presentations of historic sites and landmarks throughout the state. Whether you're interested in canals, cemeteries, charming churches, or more, Robert's tours provide a unique and enriching experience for all. And that's not it. You can also schedule private tours tailored to your interests, ensuring a personalized adventure and unforgettable memories. Perfect for families and groups of all sizes, making for an exciting hands-on learning experience that brings history to life. Simply visit holyokecanaltour.org or email bobcat4214 to book your private tour today. Getting back to our interview, can you illustrate the layout of the cemetery for us?
Yes, the very oldest burials are towards the far corner away from the sign in the gate into the cemetery. That is, you go to the left-hand side, and those are the early 1800 burials. The later 1800 burials are a little bit down the slight grade. And then the more modern burials, what you do is those are going to be towards the back of this very small cemetery and towards the right, or you go straight ahead through the gates and down. And there might be some more room in the cemetery, but who knows? Now, the cemetery is laid out so the burials, at least the old ones, are on the east-west axis, and some of the modern ones seem to be also. And most of the stones point towards the west, which they correctly should. And like I told you, they have that very special one. There are some other cool stones, limestone ones. So look around this little cemetery, and you'll get a sense of how an old neighborhood cemetery that hasn't been touched would look like.
And can you compare the cemetery to others throughout East Longmeadow?
Yes, this one here is the smallest of all, and this one here is probably the second or third oldest. There were 2 neighborhoods cemetery put at the same time, which is not unusual, because usually when one is ordered up, others are ordered up at the same time. And also the cemetery, it is unusual because very little has been done to it, and that makes it possible to have the situation I told you about in the very beginning, where the 2 very oldest gravestones are pointing in the same right direction. The footstones are pointing away, and you also have the possible in these cemeteries, small ones far away from population, that superintendents are not tempted to remove footstones in order to cut the grass better. And so you have a very unusual arrangement in the cemetery, but since it's so far away, you have the special case of the correct burial arrangement of stones and body and never been touched, and that is wonderful to see.
And thank you for listening to Canal Days and our episode on the Brookside Cemetery in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, and joining us on our journey through the rich history of the Connecticut River Valley. We hope you enjoyed uncovering some of the hidden and overlooked marvels and their fascinating stories that shaped our past in the state of Massachusetts. A special thanks to Robert Camus, founder of the Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, for sharing his passion and expertise with us. Remember, you can find more information about Robert's tours, book private tours, and explore the Canal Days video and podcast series at holyokecanaltour.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and share. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future episodes. Don't forget to keep exploring and discovering history that is hidden in plain sight all around us. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune into our next episode of Canal Days, and log on to holyokecanaltour.org. Until next time.